All right, we are going to kick this off. First of all, we are so thrilled to have so many of you here for this webinar today. We are talking about authentic storytelling in the age of AI with our friend Volt here, who we'll introduce fully in a moment. I wanted to just start by introducing myself mostly for an audio check. We'll go through some housekeeping items to let you know what you can expect from today, and then we will hand it off to Volt to talk to us about artificial intelligence and storytelling. So I'm Christine Kramer. I am the Senior Vice President of Marketing here at Carnegie. Carnegie is the leader and innovator in higher education marketing and enrollment strategy. If you're not familiar with Carnegie, I'll just do a quick overview. Carnegie is offering groundbreaking services in the areas of research, digital marketing, lead generation, student search, slate optimization, website development, creative, financial aid optimization, and strategy. And today, as I mentioned, we're talking about artificial intelligence and authentic storytelling. In my role here at Carnegie, I work with my colleagues to ensure that we are a relied upon brand and partner in higher education. I myself have spent over 15 years in higher education marketing and communications, running strategy and operations for enrollment and advising on those services as a consultant in more recent years. So if I could I could hear that intro, Christine, in the chat, or a hand raise of some kind to let me know that everyone could hear me, because the important thing is that you will be able to hear Volt. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all so much. I appreciate that sound check. So as promised, housekeeping items, just some rules for engagement today and some follow-up that we'll be providing you. So this will be 45 minutes of content with an additional 15 minutes of Q&A, which we will hold to the end. We are recording this webinar, and it will be available for download along with today's slide deck in the next couple of days. As attendees, but also registrants, will receive early access to this recording. So you can just watch your email. We'll provide you that notice when the content is available. During the webinar, you can queue up your questions for Volt by using the Zoom control panel QA feature. So that's where we'll be answering questions at the end of this webinar. We've also opened up Zoom chat. So feel free to share ideas with one another, chat back and forth, and interact with other attendees. That is very welcome. One tip, and I think actually Travis put this in the chat earlier, if you would like to speak with others, ensure that you have your share settings set to everyone. And finally, we will be sending you a survey after this webinar. We would love to collect your feedback. Let us know what you think about the content, as well as future topics that we can provide via webinar. So with that, what you all came here for today, I would like to pass the mic to Volt, our presenter for today.
Good deal. Thanks, Christine. Can everyone hear me? Can I get a couple of people letting me know my audio is okay? Audio. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. So quick introduction. I'm Voltaire. I am the compassionate and charming aficionado. My archetype colors are pink, red, and purple. I am the EVP of Creative at Carnegie. Some of you know me from my former life. Up until September of 2021, I was the CEO and the co-founder of mStoner, a boutique agency that specialized in web development for higher ed institutions. I spent the first 10 years of my life as a development officer, and fun fact about me is even though I dwell in digital every day, day in and day out, I still really love the feeling of writing with a fountain pen on actual paper. So everyone, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me today. Storytelling is a topic that is near and dear to me, and we've got a lot of things that we want to cover in the 40-some minutes that we have left. So my agenda is first to talk about the power of story, the 5 parts of story, the 5 elements of a digital story, how that all gets amped up or changed by AI, what it means to tell authentic stories in this day and age, the art of beginning, which is basically tips for getting started with AI, and then hopefully plenty of time for questions and answers. So as I mentioned, storytelling is a topic that I've been exploring for probably a good 7-8 years now. And over that time, we've developed a number of presentations, workshops, webinars, and training sessions related to different aspects of storytelling: admissions and storytelling, fundraising and alumni relations and storytelling, storytelling and analytics, storytelling and operationalization. So when the big AI wave hit, I thought it would be really, really cool to take a look at how AI changes the way we tell stories and the way that we consume stories. So I had a lot of fun doing this research, and I really appreciate your being on this journey with me. So as we get started, I want to take a poll. Ready? How are you using AI today? Here are your 3 choices, or 4 choices actually. Option 1, what is this AI you speak of, Volt? Option 2, our institution is AI adverse, privacy, copyright, all the things. Option 3, we use it informally, somewhat haphazardly. And option 4, we have a responsible AI use policy, a recommended suite of tools, training plans, and a customized large language model in place. So if you wouldn't mind taking this quick poll, letting us know where you are in your AI journey today, and give you all a few minutes to make your choice. Christine, how are those results rolling in?
They're looking pretty good. We have 200 and it's going up, 24, 25 respondents. And it looks like so far we are using it informally, somewhat haphazardly is winning by a large percentage. I think we can safely say that that is the #1 answer.
All right.
If you're interested in followed by, it's our institution is AI adverse, followed by what is AI that you speak of? 1%. We have a responsible AI or AI use policy, etc.
All right, very cool. Well, thank you all for taking that poll. It just helps to level set. We've heard a lot about AI since last November. Oh, there are the results. All right, so looks like 64% are using it informally, somewhat haphazardly. About 18% say that the institution is AI averse, and 17% are just really dipping their toes in the water. All right, let me close that poll and let's move forward then. So let's begin with the power of story, because I think that story transcends time and place, and it's something that we all as human beings resonate with. So if you're going to read one book on storytelling this year or ever, I would recommend this book. It is by Jonathan Gottschall. It's called The Storytelling Animal: How Stories Make Us Human. And he talks about the fact that story is not just about entertainment. Stories teach us facts about the world. They influence our moral logic. They mark us with fears, hopes, and anxieties. And those fears, hopes, and anxieties alter our behavior, perhaps even our personalities. So it would be great if the only thing that stories did is provide pleasure. But stories do so much more for us. Stories help us to solve problems. Stories help us to assimilate into new cultures, communities, and settings. Stories are a way for us to impart traditions to each other, to teach, to provide pattern and order, to connect with other people, and finally, to define ourselves for ourselves and for others. A couple of quotes that I want to share with you that I think are really powerful. Paul Zak talks about the fact that a compelling story with an emotional trigger alters our brain chemistry, making us more trusting, understanding, and open to ideas. It's a really great quote. It's true. It becomes even more interesting when you take a look at what his credentials are. So Paul Zak is a professor of economic sciences and the director for the Center of Neuroeconomic Studies at Claremont. Quick chat poll or quick chat answer. What is neuroeconomics? And don't ask ChatGPT. If you have an answer, throw it in the chat. Christine, are we getting any credible answers?
Not yet, but we are getting some funny jokes.
Yeah.
I think we've stumped, wait, we have behavioral economics, decision-making on buying things, behavioral economics, psychology and economics, maybe the perception of value, not absolute value, question mark, rationality and decision-making. I feel like those are
Fantastic.
good guesses.
Yeah, these are really great guesses. So the textbook definition of neuroeconomics is that it is a combination of economics, neuroscience, and psychology used to determine how individuals make economic decisions. Paul Zak specializes in the use of stories and immersive experiences to impact consumer behavior and actually shift the needle on economics and economic policies at a country level. It's really fantastic and fascinating to see what he does. So when you realize that someone like Paul Zak is using story in order to influence buying, selling, generating profits, making economies thrive, you realize how powerful stories can be. So let's talk about what actually makes a story a story. So Aristotle said that there are 5 parts to a story. There's exposition, there's complication, there's crisis, there's climax, and then there's resolution. I actually like the Pixar version of this just a little bit better. Pixar version is this: once upon a time, one day, because of that, and because of that, until finally. So people often ask me, well, what actually makes a story a story? And I say, well, you know, if all you're doing is describing a scene, that's not a story. So once upon a time, that's the start of the story. It's where you outline characters, where you outline the setting, where you might tell a little bit of the backstory. But what really makes a story is part 2, one day. This is where everything changes and conflict gets introduced. If there is no conflict, then there is really no story, because without a conflict, there can't be a resolution. And conflict and resolution are 2 things that we as human beings get hooked and wired into. It's part of what makes us respond so much to different stories that we hear. So if those are the 5 parts of the story, what are the 5 elements of a digital story? What I love about talking about story in the digital realm is that you have so many more tools that you can use because of the fact that we're going into not just a long form narrative, but everything that comes in within telling a digital story. So here are, well, actually, let me first give you a quote from Frank Rose. Stories themselves are universal. The way that we tell them changes with the technology at hand. Every new medium has given rise to a new form of narrative because people want to be immersed. And immersed is the key word in this quote. So when we think about the 5 elements of a digital story, it is all about creating an immersive experience for people. So element number 1 of a digital story is intentional design. So when people are reading stories on their screens or their iPads or on their phones, when they're digesting stories on TikTok or on Instagram, what we want to be able to do is encourage not just skimming, but reading. So intentional design to get people into the story itself and not just looking for the next hyperlink is part of what makes a good digital story great. Consideration of layout flexibility in regard to viewport size and content load times, making sure that a story with multimedia can be digested well on a telephone over mobile networks as well as over high-speed networks is a really good translation of that. Touchscreen optimized content interactions and page choreography and micro interactions are all part of intentional design that are meant to get people visually attracted to and involved with the story. The second element of a digital story is structured content. So I got my start in print, and I remember that when we were working on alumni magazines, there would be this sigh of relief when we sent the final version over to the printer. We'd signed off on the galleys and it was going to press, because at that point we realized, okay, there's nothing more that we can do. The really cool thing about digital stories is that you get to play with the content. You have what we call atomic units of information. So rather than say a 750 or 1,000 word stories, you can take a story, but you can build it up from these atomic units of information, whether that be a picture or a slideshow or a caption or a set of quotes or a summary followed by a longer form version of the story. These are all atomic pieces of information that ladder up to a larger story, but they can stand on their own. So you can push out that photo and that caption to Instagram. You can put a brief summary of a profile in your alumni magazine or your alumni newsletter. And then you can repurpose this content so that you can maximize all the time that it took to generate that content. Also, metadata and keyword planning allow people to search for their stories, and tagging and taxonomy allow people to actually look at relevant stories based on their interests. So people are not just engaged with the story that's at hand. They can also explore, they can see other content, and they can get even more immersed in storyland. The third element of a digital story is integrated media. Photography, video, audio, illustrations, infographics, and data visualization. All of these things help to bring stories to life because, like it or not, people respond more quickly to photo and video and illustration than they do to the written word. So when you are able to integrate the two of these things or all of these things, you're able to create a much more immersive experience. The fourth element is engagement opportunities. So it's not just reading the content. There are also calls to action or for next steps that you want people to take as a result of digesting that story. There are sometimes the ability to comment or to contribute to stories, the ability to share or gift content, the ability to explore related stories, and the ability to dive deeper. So a lot of digital stories that we see will have accompanying podcasts or playlists or ways for people to learn a little bit more and continue with the content that is part of the story. And the final piece of a digital story is the technology that undergirds it. So content management systems or CRMs, cloud-based collaboration tools, an analytics framework that allows you to measure and you refine your stories over time, and the ability to experiment, to optimize content based on audience behavior, to play around with headlines, to play around with different illustrations or different photography and see what plays best, so that over time, you can make better decisions about the content that is going to get people engaged. And to all of this, to all 5 elements of digital storytelling, we now add the aspect or the tool of AI. One final quote in this section, which is from Shonda Rhimes: "Figure out where it belongs." We have stories that belong as documentaries, stories that belong as podcasts. We have stories that belong as simply just articles on your website. I like to give an idea time to germinate and grow and make sure that it's the right place to be successful. And when we take all of the digital tools that we just reviewed, the 5 parts that make, or the 5 elements of digital stories, you can see that you can deploy content across a number of different channels, hopefully more easily, and then really measure it and see how that content is performing. So let's move that forward and talk about how this all gets impacted by AI. So one more game. Let's play 2 truths and a lie. Statement number 1, roughly 25% of the content used to train ChatGPT came from news outlets and arts and entertainment sites. Option number 2, what makes generative AI so extraordinary is the fact that it exhibits not only knowledge, but also understanding and intent in its answers. And option 3, AI has proven itself to be very adept at predicting story arcs that will elicit strong emotional reactions from people. Which one is the lie? Bum, 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 bum. Christine, how are the results rolling in?
They are still rolling in. So I think we'll give everyone another 15 seconds or so to participate. I love the participation so far. Everybody's answering.
Awesome.
All right, let's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We'll close the poll and share the results.
All right. Ooh, this is very almost evenly split. So 27% of people say that statement number 1 is a lie, that roughly 25% of the content used to train ChatGPT came from news outlets and entertainment sites. 40% say that number 2 is the lie, that generative AI is extraordinary because it exhibits both knowledge and intent. And then 33% say that the third statement is a lie. All right, so the lie is number 2. Now, to be sure, ChatGPT has been very secretive about the actual websites and content that they have used, that OpenAI has used to train ChatGPT. But the Washington Post did a really great article about a month and a half ago that analyzed where they think the content would come from. And in fact, yes, 25% of ChatGPT content used to train that engine came from news outlets and arts and entertainment. Number 2, what makes this a lie? The fact is that AI has a lot of knowledge, but what it does not have is understanding and intent. And we'll cover that in just a second. And the third statement is actually true. So it turns out that MIT, in concert with one other corporate partner whose name escapes me right now, did a study of story families, basically different patterns of stories that are grouped together, and had AI analyze based on response and posts on videos, what stories were going to elicit the strongest emotional reactions from people. And AI was able to predict the story arcs that people would get most excited about and say most about. So in fact, AI is adept at not necessarily feeling that emotion, right? But knowing when we might feel that emotion. So let's talk a little bit, brief primer on AI. And I think a lot of people will know this already, so I apologize if this is a little bit of retread for you. So AI as a fledgling scientific field actually took shape in the 1950s. So we're talking about a little less than 80 years now. And the discipline of deep machine learning upon which ChatGPT and DALL-E 2 are based really was incredibly slow to develop, and it endured 2 AI winters. So let me pause for a second and explain what an AI winter is. During that 70-some years, there were 2 periods of time, roughly a decade long each, where people who were doing deep machine learning research had no corporate or federal funding. They were basically told, this is a non-starter technology, we're not going to invest in it. It really wasn't until 2012 that deep machine learning really took off. And in the most recent years, where corporate and basically investor interest really started throwing billions of dollars into AI research. I think it's important to realize that the AI winters existed because I believe that part of what we're seeing right now in terms of this extraordinary AI hype cycle, I mean, AI is everywhere. And I really believe that part of the reason that we're seeing so much hype is that the people who are working on AI and investing on AI do not want to endure another AI winter. So even some of the, and I know this is the cynic in me, but even some of the churn around whether AI is going to absolutely destroy humanity and civilization is unfortunately intent on raising more money and getting more people to use these tools, strange as it sounds. Third point, large language models are trained using vast amounts of data, largely from the internet. And the way that LLMs, large language models, process data, which is modeled after neural networks in the human brain, makes them incredible prediction and probability engines. They are masters of pattern recognition. So sounds great, right? And one wonders then, well, what's the downside? I'll get to that in a second. If you are going to read one book this year on AI, I would recommend Genius Makers, the Mavericks who brought AI to Google, Facebook, and the world. Cade Metz has been covering AI for more than a decade. He writes for the New York Times. I believe he writes for the Post as well. And in his book, he says, the rise of deep learning marked a fundamental change in the way digital technology was built. Rather than carefully defining how a machine was supposed to behave, one rule at a time, one line of code at a time, engineers were beginning to build machines that could learn tasks through their own experiences. And these experiences spanned such enormous amounts of digital information, no human could ever wrap their head around it all. So the fact of the matter is that in some ways, because of the way that large language models have evolved and the way they digest content, they are incredibly great storytellers. Just pause for that for a second. They are incredibly great storytellers. But what's the downside? The downside is they're not human. I love this. ChatGPT does not have childhood trauma. So as much as AI can simulate interaction and predict what we want and what we expect, AI continues to fall short in a number of ways. So if you all are not familiar with the Marketing AI Institute, definitely Google them and sign up for their newsletters and their information. They do some great work. They publish a lot of knowledge capital. And they did a really, I thought, an excellent AI writer summit back in April. Paul Retzer, who is the CEO and the keynote speaker at that summit, said, there are three things that AI can't do. AI cannot replicate or replace human experience. It can't empathize with the reader or connect at a personal level. And finally, it can't feel anything when it creates. There's also one other problem. AI sometimes gets it really wrong. So for those of you who know me from my mStoner days, my business partner, Bill, sent this to me one Friday night, and he had asked ChatGPT, how did mStoner get its name? The name mStoner is derived from the surname of its founder and CEO, Voltaire Voque M. Santosus. He combined the initial letter of his last name, M, with Stoner to create the company name. The letter M does not have any specific meaning or significance. It was chosen as part of the branding and naming process for the company. So those of you who know mStoner probably are going to get a really big laugh out of this, because mStoner actually came from Michael Stoner, my co-founder, and we named it after him because he had a lot of traction in the industry when we started mStoner some 22 years ago. So AI is really great in some ways, but in some ways it gets it horribly wrong. And frankly, a house cat has more sensibility and common sense than AI does. So let's talk about what then authenticity in an age of AI means. So in all the research that I've done and the people that I've talked with in the industry, I've landed on 4 philosophical statements that I think sum up our approach to storytelling and AI. The first is that storytelling is a deeply human experience. It is created by humans for humans. The second guiding philosophy is the advent of AI-driven technology does not alter the essence of story. Going back to what we talked about at the beginning of this webinar, the idea of once upon a time until one day, and because of that, until finally, that storytelling arc, that storytelling structure remains completely intact. And the introduction of new technology doesn't alter the fact that that structure is something that we as humans resonated deeply with. The third guiding philosophy is that good stories are anchored in truth. Great stories come to life through the details that make our stories our own. And that's why human experience is so important, is that AI can generate some interesting and believable plot lines, and that we'll talk in just a few minutes about some of the tools that you can use to do that. But stories that are incredible stories because of the details that we infuse them with, the details that only we have to share and that make the stories our own. And the final guiding philosophy, which sets the stage for the art of the beginning, is this: we serve ourselves best when we employ AI as a tool. It is neither a toy nor necessarily an existential threat, but it is a tool that makes us better storytellers. So let's talk about how you can actually apply that. The art of beginning. So this is a really great quote from Mike Caput. He's the chief content officer for the Marketing AI Institute that I mentioned just a little bit ago. As you're getting started with AI, there are two things for you to really get your head around. The first is understanding the copyright considerations. So it's important for you to know that when you're using AI as a tool, you might not be able to claim copyright on that material. Last March, the US Copyright Office issued a statement that said, copyright material is only the product, quote unquote, of human creativity. So if you use AI for content that you're generating, that content is not completely protected under copyright law. So it's important, depending on the sort of content or the stories you're telling, the stuff that you're producing, it's important to check in with your attorneys to understand where you might fall and make sure that you're comfortable with that level of risk that you might introduce, and then also understand the limitations of AI. Mike said in his presentation, in almost no scenario would you be able to click a button, generate text, and publish it to the world without human review and intervention. And that is the state of where we are with AI today. So with that framework in mind, my recommendation is, as you're getting started with AI tools for storytelling, the really important thing to do first is decide what issues you're trying to solve and choose the best solutions for the work at hand. Just because AI can do something doesn't mean you need or want it to do something. And every one of you on this call is going to be a little bit different in terms of what you think AI might be able to bring to the table for you. So I've got a few use case scenarios for you to take a look at. If you said to me, Volt, what's really important for me is to get the writers on my team or the people who are telling stories to practice good grammar, to write clearly and succinctly, to get rid of passive statements, to adhere to our editorial guidelines, to really strike a good sense of tone and style that is true to our brand. And I want my writers to become more confident. Then I would recommend the following 4 tools. I am a huge user of Grammarly. I love the fact that you can program Grammarly with rules, that you can set a number of different style intentions within Grammarly. And I find that I run Grammarly literally on every single piece of content that I write, that I generate. And I probably accept all of the grammatical errors or corrections, and probably about 20% of when they try to rewrite me. But it's really cool to see how even a turn of phrase or a change of a verb could make a couple of my sentences better. So I love Grammarly. I really also enjoyed using Jasper, Hyperwrite, and WordTune. All of these tools are really geared toward helping you to improve grammar, tone, style, and general writing. So that's use case scenario 1. You might say to me, Volt, I really just need a tool to help me brainstorm, to help me get past that blank page, to help me to think of plot points and story arcs. Try these: Pseudo-Write, Novel AI, OpenAI, which is ChatGPT, or Plot Factory. So just for fun, if you're looking for a good laugh, go to ChatGPT later on today and use a prompt that is somewhat along these lines. Act as if you are David Lynch. Tell me the story of Sleeping Beauty. And then plug in, act as if you are Taylor Swift. Tell me the story of Sleeping Beauty. And you will see a really funny and actually quite pointedly on the nose sort of result from that. And then when you're done playing with that, I would challenge you to take a story from your website. Maybe it's an alumni profile, maybe it's a student profile or a faculty profile. Plug it into ChatGPT with the following prompt: make this a better story and write to the 10th grade level. And see what you get. And see whether you like it just a little bit better than what appeared on your website or what appeared in your alumni magazine. I find that sometimes using these tools helps us to identify the conflict that I talked about a little bit earlier, that sort of story arc that makes it less of a sort of expository or exposition of someone and more of an actual story that has a conflict and resolution. So if you're looking for a tool that helps you to up that sort of conflict, tension, story arc game, try these out. Third use case scenario, you want to operationalize content. You want to make sure that you are writing content that is SEO optimized, that is intended for social, and you want your team to be able to do this fast, quickly, and fit it into your workflow, then check out these tools. Writer.com, GoCharlie, Demandwell, Copymatic, Copy AI, Phrase, and Lately. These are all designed to help with the operationalization of content production with a special focus on SEO and in some cases on social media platforms. And then you might say to me, well, really, what we need is we need more help with multimedia assets. So if that's the case, and to be honest with you, this is where I find that tools are a little less helpful for anything other than, say, generative fills or altering photographs quickly and easily without having to learn Adobe's ins and outs for Photoshop. But check out Tome. Tome is actually a sort of outlier on this list. Tome produces presentations for you, everything from the outline to the content to the visuals. And they do really, in some cases, beautiful visual presentations. So if you're looking to up your presentation game, Tome is great. Otherwise, if what you're looking for is some help with photographs or some way to better visualize as you are telling a story or trying to bring a story to life, take a look at Adobe, DALL-E 2, Midjourney, Visla, or Gloss AI. So a few quotes that I want to end us with. The first comes from Paul Retzer, who I mentioned earlier was the founder and the CEO of the Marketing AI Institute. He said in that Writer Summit, AI won't replace writers, but writers who use AI will replace those who don't. Jonathan Gottschall, who I mentioned earlier in this webinar, has just written a companion book to The Storytelling Animal. It's called The Story Paradox: How Our Love of Storytelling Builds Societies and Tears Them Down. He says here, we are a species with a bottomless appetite for story, and technology has broken down all the barriers to how much we can make and consume. Our technology has made them more ubiquitous, more powerful, and more weaponizable. And then the ethicist from the New York Times says, even if generative AI does create more employment and more wealth than it destroys, there will be human costs and they will fall unevenly. The solution isn't to stop innovating. And that brings me to the concluding quote that I want to share with you. This comes from Anne Handley. What matters most now is that we tell true stories well. So AI, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as we've been employing it, is a really useful tool that helps us to become better storytellers, but it does not abdicate the responsibility for telling stories that are true, for being honest and forthright in the way that we create those stories, and in using those stories for good and not harm. And I think that the last thought that I will share with you is that at the end of the day, as I had mentioned before, storytelling is a deeply human experience, and it is our responsibility as storytellers to keep humans and the human experience at the heart of our story. Thank you. All right, Christine, I think we're ready for Q&A.
Wonderful. Okay. Here we go. To, and this is in quotes, the next words, up the story, end quote, of existing materials. Do you share the link with OpenAI, or is the prompt created by copying and pasting the story into OpenAI?
I copy and paste the story into AI, and what I'll do is I will write the prompt first and then paste the story underneath.
Wonderful. So actually, this next question is related. This person is highlighting the fact that the prompt is required, and they're asking, what are some recommendations you have for creating accurate and specific prompts to get what you need in the most efficient way?
Oh, yeah, that's a really, really, really great question. So, I will answer and I will point you to the New York Times. There is a new series on AI in the New York Times. And I'll find this later and find a way to share it out with everyone that talks about how to write golden prompts. Basically, what you want to do is you want to give it some direction. So the first thing that you want to do is like set a tone or style. So for instance, when I was saying, David Lynch, act as if you are David Lynch, or act as if you are Taylor Swift, you could plug in something like, act as if you are writing a story for um, prospective college students. So give AI enough, or a ChatGPT enough of a sense of the sort of voice and tone that you're looking for. And also, if you are aiming for a specific sort of level of reading, you want to plug that in. And the final recommendation I would make is once you put the prompt in, you can also ask GPT, what other information do you need to do this well? So I would put some parameters around the prompts that you create and specificity. Ask if there is any other information that could help ChatGPT fill in the blanks. And then basically thread your ChatGPT prompts. So don't start new chats, basically keep building on that chat that you've already started, because that will give you, number one, a nice sort of continuity of record, and number two, allow you to iterate on the prompts that you're giving.
Okay, great. Question here. Is there a percent or percentage threshold of changes to an AI response where it would become considered original human content by a human? Sorry. So considered original content by a human?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. And I believe that that is going to be the subject of debate in courts for a number of years. The last I checked was that the way that the Copyright Office was drawing a distinction is if you said, oh, this was 80% generated by me, 20% generated by AI, that they would draw the line there and say, all right, well, the stuff that you wrote, the 80% that you wrote is protected under copyright law, but not the stuff that is protected, or not the stuff that AI generated. How people are actually going to tell that, how they're actually going to adjudicate that, I have no idea. So I would say just keep on watching as more information and more really more details emerge in terms of how this is actually going to play out legally.
Okay. Inquiring minds are wondering, Vol, if we can have some more detail on how promoting the idea of AI being the end of humanity makes humans want to use artificial intelligence more. Your opinion on that?
Oh, sure. So this actually came out of, I think it was either, trying to think now who it was. Oh, okay, it was Ted Liang in an interview that he gave for the New Yorker. And he was talking about the fact that there was an expose, I think, in the LA Times recently about how when you tell people that maybe they don't want to use this because it's dangerous, that it actually makes them want it more. Which I can see is part of human nature, but I can also see that some of the hype around the danger of AI is very beneficial to the AI inventors and innovators, because it keeps AI in the forefront of people's minds. And I think that that is the main import when people are saying, oh, well, a lot of this hype is basically meant to help AI continue to thrive. The more it's in the spotlight, even bad press is good. And the more people are thinking about AI, the less likely it will be to be defunded. And frankly, and this is again the cynic in me, I know we're talking a lot about AI regulation and what we should be doing and governing boards, and we know how the world works. I think it's going to be a long time, and it's going to be 2 or 3 shades too gray to actually make a difference. And it's certainly not going to stop the pace of innovation, because frankly, if we don't do it, someone else will. So I don't expect that we're going to see a pause of AI. I don't expect we're going to see a moratorium on AI.
All right, we have a few questions or a handful of questions around the topic of a note or citation, how to indicate if a story has been edited with input from artificial intelligence tools. And basically, we're looking for your opinion on, do you think this is important, especially for higher ed? The other couple of questions are in the same vein, with one slanting towards college students specifically being falsely accused of using artificial intelligence to write their papers, and how do we combat this? So multi-layered question, but about citation and watermarks, and combating falsely accused usage.
Yeah, I think that this is okay. So I'll take this question in two parts. So let's start with, in some ways, the easier part, which is college students being falsely accused of using AI for their term papers. This is, I think, one of the things that worries people most now in terms of how the educational landscape is going to change, not the marketing to prospective students, but the actual educational experience. Now, the fact of the matter is that AI detection technology kind of sucks. It doesn't work very well. And most of the experts that I have read make statements about this have agreed that it is not technology. AI, quote unquote, will not save us from AI. So the detection tools are faulty at best. And then that really brings up a question of how you use a tool like this to make the educational experience better, right? I mean, so, and this is a cheap comparison, but how many people object to spell check? I mean, most of us are like, please, please, please run your document through spell check, because it will make your content better. So in what ways do we take AI and teach people how to use it without abdicating the need to teach people to think logically, to write clearly, to be able to communicate their ideas? I think that, and this might be a counterculture view, one of the pain points that AI does really address really well is the fact that most people stink at writing, right? And I know that writing is at once one of the least valued skills and one of the most in-demand skills in industry, because people have become worse and worse writers over time. So when you have a tool that can help you to write better, how do we teach people to use that tool to help them write better without giving them the reins to say, all right, well, just do it all for me? Because that isn't a learning experience. That is just, that's just cheating, right? So I think that what we're going to see right now is faculty members thinking through how it is that AI can be integrated meaningfully as a tool, as a technology that can actually make our lives better, and not as a way to cheat or to basically drop out of the educational experience. Now, when it comes to watermarks and AI and whether you cite AI, I think that part of that will depend on what content you're producing and what the intent is. And this gets, when you think about what's happening with the Writers Guild in California and the strike that's going on about content being produced that doesn't have a copyright, and jobs being lost because AI can generate decent enough plot lines that that people don't need actual writers. You look at something like that and you're like, okay, yeah, where do we draw the line? I don't honestly have a hard and fast rule about when you will cite at the bottom of a document that you used AI in order to generate something. I do think that if it's an academic piece of any sort, then it becomes more important to do that. And in all cases, I think it is really important to fact check, because as I mentioned earlier, AI will produce very confident sounding content that is crap. So it does not, you need to fact check everything that you use AI to help you generate. Ooh, Rachel had just asked about the things outside of Grammarly. I'll post that for you in a second. So Christine, does that help?
That does. And I have a number more questions for you here, Volt. So we'll jump to the next one here. So this individual says, first of all, hi and great presentation. With all of your experimentation, where have you found it most useful to introduce artificial intelligence in the writing process? Or do you use it throughout to refine, etc.?
I think it all depends on what I am trying to do. So I would say, and this is for me, and every person I talk to is very different about the way that they use AI. So I mentioned Paul Retzer a little bit earlier, the guy who's the CEO for the Marketing AI Institute. And he and Ann Handley had this really great conversation as part of the Writer Summit. And they were both like, yeah, don't use it at all for writing because I don't need it. I don't need anyone to help me generate ideas. And in fact, the writing process helps me to form my opinions and think things out. So for everyone, again, it's going to be different in terms of what you need and what you want help with. And just because AI does something doesn't mean that you can or that you should use it. For me personally, the go-tos I have are Grammarly. I use that for everything from emails to stories I'm writing to documents, strategies I'm developing. Because for me, catching those errant grammatical errors, those times when I forget to introduce a comma, those times where I have constructed a really complicated sentence that needs to be simplified, I love Grammarly for that because it catches me and it keeps me honest. Now, if you use Grammarly or you haven't used Grammarly, one of the things that you can see with Grammarly is there's two levels of editing. There is the level of, oh, dude, you got this wrong. This needs a period, or your subject and verb don't agree. I will accept probably 100% of those recommendations. And then you can click a little button that has additional recommendations. And that's where Grammarly gets a little bit more invasive and says, well, you could rewrite the sentence like this, or you could rewrite the sentence like that. And I would say between 20% to 30% of the time, I will look at what they recommended and say, yeah, all right, I think that's a lot clearer. But 70% of the time, I will say, Grammarly, yeah, but I like my phrasing better because it sounds like me. So Grammarly is what I use on a day-to-day just for the mechanics of writing. And then I use ChatGPT when I want a reality check, right? When I've written something and I say, oh, all right, this sounds really, really beautiful, but can it be better? And I will copy and paste it and I will ask ChatGPT, I will prompt it to either make this story better or reorganize this so the premise is clearer along those lines. So I will use ChatGPT when I want a reality check. I barely use the multimedia tools, basically because most of what I do is written word. But if that helps at all, that's sort of my suite of tools. But if in your cases, you might find, you know what, I really do want someone to help me to generate storylines. Or Paul Retzer talked about the fact that he used ChatGPT to generate the outline for his keynote speech based on the topic that he wanted to cover and the points he wanted to cover. And he showed what that outline looked like. It was really good. And he threw it out completely. And he said, all right, what I'm going to talk about is what happens when what you love to do most changes overnight. So these tools are really great, but they're only tools. And at the end of the day, you decide how much of this is really helpful to you and how much of this you want.
Wonderful. All right, well, I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll share some resources and let everyone get to their afternoon. But just also a quick comment that we've gotten a lot of great questions, and this might be a really nice opportunity to follow up. So just a plug for the Carnegie blog here and recorded webinar channels that we have an ongoing series on artificial intelligence. And some of your questions, I think, warrant some follow-up pieces. So thank you for all the questions and the ideas here. Well, the last question I have for you is, For coworkers who are scared to touch, address, or act quickly on artificial intelligence, do you have recommendations on how to open the conversation in a way that eliminates the fear factor? And there's this very similar question, or somewhat similar question, that asks about the due diligence that you might do before investing time in some of these tools.
Yeah,
So,
those are
how do you
really
open?
great questions. And I think that the fear is real, right? Because people, going back to the quote from the ethicist, we know that jobs will be lost. We know that industries are going to be changed. We know that the shape of the work that we're going to do is going to continue to evolve as more and more tools become available and as AI becomes more and more sophisticated. So it's very reasonable. In fact, I remember when we started talking with signature writers, our long form writers, our high conceptual writers at Carnegie about this. I think the sensibility when it was all first coming out was, well, they're going to take our jobs. They're going to replace us. And I think that where we're coming to now, and maybe this is a really good place to start in these conversations, is the idea that for all of the hype, AI has its limitations, and you are the ones who have to decide and should decide in what ways you're going to use them. So if someone doesn't want to use AI for any reason whatsoever, then they don't need to use AI. And I think that over time, people will become comfortable in adopting the tools that are going to make their work better and their lives, well, hopefully more enriched by the fact that stuff that they might not have wanted to do can be stuff that is automated. So I think that is the way that I would approach talking with people who are worried about AI. I also think that it's important for every institution to think through what their responsible AI use policy is. There is a, I don't think I can post this to as a document to chat, but I'll share this out, or I'll ask Christine to share this out when we share out the materials. There is a great list of responsible AI philosophies and policies from the Marketing AI Institute that I think if an institution codifies how it is and isn't going to use AI, that it will help people understand what the parameters of adoption are. Now, to the second question, what sort of diligence do you want to do in adopting these tools? First is, I would say, if you're worried about copyright at all, talk to your attorneys and find out where they stand on this and given the sort of content that you want to produce. The second is that this feels a lot to me like, let's see, about 22 years ago, where the content management system space exploded. And we had thousands and thousands of people producing content management systems. You take a look at the number of outfits, startups, and big businesses that are investing in AI right now. It went from like 50 to over 1,000 in less than, say, 7 months. So the field is exploding with a lot of options. That means that a lot of those are going to shut down, right? That typically happens when you have a big explosion of tech, is that people will get winnowed out because they can't afford to keep developing, because they didn't have enough infrastructure in place to support clients. So the tool that you start with might not be the tool that you are using 2 years from now. So I would say, take a look, do your due diligence in terms of looking at what the pricing is, what the obligations for contracts are, what the training and client success resources are, and then I would say use these experimentally and don't commit to anything long-term until you really have the chance to do a proof of concept on all of this stuff. So I think that you'll find that there are a number of tools that will do the work that you want to do well, but then you can take a look at the resources and the support that you get as another sort of barometer or way to decide which tool to go with.
Great. Thank you, Volt. So we are going to bring this to a close by thanking you for your time, Volt, and thanking all of our attendees for joining us today for this really interesting topic. We do have a couple of resources to share with you that were just dropped into the chat. These are all content pieces that Volt and a team that he is working with at Carnegie, specifically on artificial intelligence, have produced. This is the series that I mentioned before that you may see one of your questions or topics come up in future content pieces, but they were just shared in the chat for you. I also want to mention that there were a lot of really good resources shared by attendees and your peers during this webinar. So if you want to take a minute and scroll to the top, we will keep this open for a minute or two so that you can go and look. I wrote it down a couple of times. 111 specifically, there's a bunch of really great ideas about how people are using these tools. 140 was another time that I wrote down. And Volt mentioned that there's a couple of additional resources that he has that we'll make sure to get to you as well. So thank you all so much for your time today. Thank you, Volt. And of course, just the last resource is that Carnegie is always a resource. And if you are looking for a strategic partner in marketing strategy, enrollment strategy, we are here for you. Feel free to get in touch with us. There's a link that was posted and you can always email me directly, which I think the link to my email was also posted. So thank you all so much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you all next time. We'll just let this run for a single minute so everybody can look at the good advice that was in the chat as well.
Fantastic. Thank you all.